Joining us now on the line from the nation's capital, Eric Hoskins. He is Ontario's Minister of Citizenship and Immigration and the MPP for the riding of St. Paul's. And Minister, this is one of the crazy scheduling things of our lives. You're the minister responsible in this area for TVO. We're in your riding, and yet we get you on the line from Ottawa. You're a busy guy, I guess.
But you made it work.
And Minister, let me just do a little business first, because we want to remind our viewers that you are part of tonight's Your Agenda broadcast. Fifth column blogger Mike Miner is hosting a live chat on our Inside Agenda blog at tvo.org/theagenda and on our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/theagenda. You can also send us a tweet at twitter.com #YourAgenda. Please jump in and we'll get to your comments throughout the course of the night and maybe put some of them up on the screen as well. Okay, with this interview, Minister, we are wrapping up a week's worth of programs called Immigration and Its Discontents, and one point has come up over and over and over again, and that is that yes, people do in the main favor immigration, but they also favor integration. And I want to know whether you agree with that as well.
Well, you know, first of all, I think that the majority of Canadians, including the majority of Ontarians, strongly support immigration as a way of nation building. We're a country built by immigrants, and immigrants continue to help build and strengthen this country and our province. And so there's tremendous support for immigration, and whatever label you want to apply to it, whether you're talking about integration or whether you're talking about finding ways for our newcomers to be part of their communities, to be respected as new citizens of this country, and to find opportunities to contribute to building a stronger Ontario. You know, if you want to call that integration, or if you want to call it simply meeting all their rights and responsibilities, but also opportunities as Canadians, as Ontarians, it's an important part of who we are.
But do you think that, I mean, certainly one of the things we heard loud and clear was that people want newcomers to this province, you know, it's less about the mosaic now, ironically enough, and more about the melting pot. They really want people to buy into so-called Canadian values, Ontario values, and I wonder, is that important to you as well?
Well, of course it's important to me, and certainly, and in the year that I've been Minister of Citizenship and Immigration, I've had the opportunity to meet, as you can imagine, with many thousands of members of our immigrant communities, including many, many newcomers and those that help them. And I have no doubt that they share the values that we hold dear here. They are highly motivated to succeed. They want to be significant contributors to our communities and to our province, and they're doing this. And there are many, many examples where various communities and individuals within those communities have succeeded in many, many ways, whether it's arts and culture, whether it's creating businesses of their own and employing dozens, if not hundreds, of fellow Ontarians. So they certainly do hold the values that we do, and they're working hard to make an impact just like all of us.
So let me bring up one more thing, and that is, again, we heard this many, many times this past week, language skills. We heard people say, my English was good enough to get into the country and I guess pass the immigration test, but actually it isn't good enough to find a job or to function properly in Ontario society. And I wonder whether you think Ottawa needs to make the language proficiency test tougher to meet the realities of trying to live in this society.
Well, I don't know if they need to make the language test tougher, but I think it's important, and we're working with them on this, to ensure that among those immigrants that we're selecting, particularly those for their human capital, for their economic opportunities, that language is an important aspect of that. In fact, it's probably the biggest predictor of success, economic success here in Ontario. And as a result, both the federal government and ourselves at the provincial level, we invest many millions of dollars in language training programs. The Ontario government, our programs deliver language training, English and French language training, to more than 120,000 newcomers just this year alone, over 2010. And in addition, we've created something which is really quite unique and important that we call job-specific language training. And many of these programs are delivered right in the workplace, where we help our newcomers not just learn better English or better French, but also the language of the workplace, so that they can understand how to communicate about their trade or their profession, but also to learn about the culture of the workplace.
Okay, let's get to, Minister, this problem that you're having right now with the federal government over the issue of how much money goes to immigrants when they come to this province. The provincial government says the money's being cut. The federal government says the money's being reallocated to better deal with the realities of the needs of Canada today. Give us your case. What do you say?
Well, let's be clear about this. This is a cut, plain and simple. I mean, if you look at it across the country as a whole, The federal ministry is cutting immigration services by $53 million this coming year. That's a cut, it's not a redistribution, and there are several provinces, British Columbia and Ontario being the two that are taking the biggest hit. In fact, out of the $53 million that's being cut, $44 million, or about 80% of the cut, is happening right here in Ontario. So it's not a redistribution of funds. In fact, at a time when immigration in Canada is increasing nationally, this is a $53 million cut to the programs that help ensure that our newcomers are able to succeed.
I think their position, though, is that more immigrants are going out west and to Atlantic provinces. Fewer, as a proportion of the total, are coming to Ontario. Therefore, the western and Atlantic provinces are going to get a bigger chunk of the immigration fund pie, if you like, and Ontario will get less. That's their position. You don't buy it?
Well, I don't buy it. If it was redistribution, and it needs to take into account the unique needs that each province has. For example, and when you look at it overall, it's interesting that the federal minister, Minister Kenney, he excludes Quebec when he's talking about the national situation and suggesting that Ontario has more than its fair share of revenue to help our newcomers. But the reality is that Ontario receives about 45% of all of the immigrants that come to Canada each year, and we receive approximately 46% of the funding to go towards newcomer services. So in fact, it's almost an exact match. What the federal government wants to do is it wants to cut that by 15%. We're saying that that's unfair. It's not fair to Ontario, and it's certainly not fair to our newcomers. And it's coming at a time when newcomers and Ontario can least afford it, when our economy is just beginning to emerge from the very serious global downturn. The unemployment rate among our newcomers is more than twice what it is for non-newcomers. So it's a time when we're very vulnerable. Our newcomers are an important part of our plan to strengthen Ontario's economy going forward. And this cut of $44 million this year and probably approximately $70 million the following year is devastating, and it's resulting with a lot of closures of our settlement agencies and cutbacks, and it's going to be very hard for our newcomers and for Ontario to recover from this.
If this money is absolutely necessary and the federal government, as you say, won't put it forward, will the Ontario government make up the difference?
Well, look, we can't step in every time the federal government decides to try to download its services or a cut of this magnitude. We simply can't afford at this time to come up with the funds which are federal funds. And I should add that this is on top of a previous $207 million cut in the first Canada-Ontario immigration agreement, which we're just winding up in the next couple of months. And so there was a promise by the federal government to commit $207 million to help our newcomers, and that was about a quarter of the total in the contract that we had with them. And they have not delivered on that $207 million, and here we go with another $44 million. And again, I mean, to put this in real terms, this is to help our newcomers with their language training, with bridge training, which is to enhance their skills, to help get them rapidly and effectively into the workforce so they can practice their skills or their trades. 70% of the newcomers that come to Ontario have post-secondary education training. So these are very valuable individuals. We need to get them into the workforce. This is about Ontario's economy. It's about them starting businesses of their own in many cases and employing other Ontarians, and it's about all of them paying taxes to provide the services like healthcare and education that we rely on.
Well, at the risk of beating a dead horse, I want to try this one more time because I do want to understand whether or not this is a cut we're talking about or a reallocation that we're talking about. Your federal counterpart, Jason Kenney, whom you referenced a moment ago, says over the past 5 years, immigration to Ontario has dropped from 145,000 to 106,000 per year. And so he says he is adjusting the money to go to where the immigrants are going. If fewer are coming to Ontario, he believes Ontario should get less money. Now that seems to make sense on the face of it. What are we missing here?
Well, first of all, if we put aside for a moment the $53 million cut across the country at a time when immigration is increasing, and that is a cut. In Ontario, what he neglects to say, as I mentioned, is that Ontario gets 45% of the immigrants and 46% of the funding for those newcomers, and he wants to cut that by approximately 15%. He also doesn't include the fact that Ontario has the highest rate of retention of our newcomers. We also have one of the highest, if not the highest, rate of what's called secondary migration. So that's immigrants, newcomers that may land in another part of the country but choose to come to Ontario either because of job opportunities or perhaps they have family or relatives here. And the other thing that is important here is that their calculation, which is an arbitrary calculation that they want to impose upon Ontario, is based on a 3-year model which suggests that once newcomers have been here for a couple of years, they no longer rely on services that we provide to them, like language training and job search skills and other skills to get them into the workplace. So we disagree with that. We believe that it's important to, we don't put a time limit on the length of time that our newcomers can avail themselves of Ontario's services. And then finally, there are other gaps that the federal government is refusing to acknowledge, and that's the fact that Ontario receives the highest proportion of family class as well as refugees of any province or territory in Canada. We have the highest proportion, and those are individuals that have their own unique circumstances and complex needs, and it requires added resources to be able to provide them with what they require to enter the workforce and be active parts of their communities. Okay. So it's not as black and white or as simple as the federal minister would like us to believe. And certainly when you compare us with other provinces, with Quebec, for example, which receives approximately $5,000 per newcomer coming to that province, Ontario, with these cuts, will be receiving next year approximately $3,000.
Should those numbers be the same?
Well, I think that the level of funding that Quebec receives is an appropriate level for them. Again, you need to look at each province's unique circumstances. The first Canada-Ontario immigration agreement that we signed with the federal government almost 6 years ago now, it was predicated on the fact that Ontario has its unique needs, and also the fact that Ontario and other provinces across Canada were grossly underfunded in terms of what the services that the newcomers require. So the first COIA agreement, if I can call it that, began to reverse that imbalance, if you will. But as I mentioned, $207 million of that promise is still unfulfilled by the federal government, and now we have an additional $44 million of cuts. But to show you how devastating it will be, I met this week, it was the second time I met with them as a group, but of course I've met with many settlement agencies on an individual basis. There are 35 settlement agencies in Ontario who have received 100% of their funding from CIC, from the federal government, cut as of the end of March. Some of them, quite a number of them, are fearful that they're going to have to close. The estimated job loss is approximately 1,000 individuals in Ontario because of these unilateral federal cuts that we were not part of. And then furthermore, and most importantly, it's estimated that more than 10,000 newcomers will be unable to find or avail themselves of the vital services that they depend on to enter their economy and find jobs.
Okay, Minister, some people who've watched this program for a long time may know that I'm a Hamiltonian and I love Hamilton, and they may know that I also happen to love football. Having said that, I'm going to put this question out to you. Your government announced this past week that they're going to spend an additional $22 million on top of an initial $35 million to renovate Iverwin Stadium in Hamilton in order to prepare it for the Pan Am Games, and of course the Tiger Cats will benefit from that as well. That is, if my math is correct, $57 million in total. You have said that the gap that the federal government wants to cut back on this province is a little less than that, more than $40 million. And I want to know whether you've gone to, I know you're going to tell me cabinet solidarity and all that, but humor me for a second. Have you gone to the cabinet table and said, how come we got money for football stadiums in Hamilton and we haven't got money to help settle immigrants in this province?
Well, believe me, there's a lot of support around the cabinet table for our newcomers and our immigrants. And it's the difficulty, the problem with your calculation is that it may be $44 million this year. We're told that it's likely to be $70 million the year after that. And there's $207 million which is unspent. So my approach has been to, and I should add to that, since 2003, the McGuinty government has invested almost $1 billion in our newcomers, in our immigrants, our new immigrants, to help them succeed, to help them join the workforce and create businesses, to employ other Ontarians. So we have been investing a significant amount. We've invested more than $200 million in bridge training programs to help our newcomers hone their skills. But what I believe my responsibility is at this point in time, we've just entered negotiations 2 weeks ago to negotiate a new agreement, Canada-Ontario immigration agreement with the federal government. And my role, my responsibility is to fight hard for Ontarians, for our newcomers, to convince the federal government that they've made a mistake and for them to reverse the $44 million cut and to keep their promise and provide the $207 million which they are contractually obligated to provide Ontario to benefit Ontarians and newcomers, for them to restore that money.
Okay, I got less than a minute to go here, and let me ask you one last question. We like to, talk substance 90% of the time on this program, but we'll spend 10% of the time talking about crass politics, and that's what our last minute's going to focus on here. The Conservatives are strong in the West, and that's where more of the immigration money is going to. They're not as strong in Ontario, although they certainly want to stay competitive here. Do you think that just sort of, brass knuckles, crass politics is what's behind some of this decision anyway?
Well, I always like to get into a political discussion. I think the answer for that, you're going to have to ask if Minister Kenney would like to appear on your show and give his own explanation. I don't know. I mean, I certainly hope that politics isn't part of this. My fight for Ontarians and my fight for a fair deal for Ontario and a fair deal for our newcomers is not based on partisan politics. It's based on a belief that we need these individuals. We're told that in the coming years, with the declining birth rate and an aging population, we're going to depend on our immigrants more and more to fill those jobs, especially highly skilled jobs. And it's important, it's essential really, to build a strong Ontario and a strong economy going forward. That's why I'm fighting for it. I think you'll have to ask Minister Kenney why he's not supporting our newcomers in Ontario, why he's made this cut. But I can tell you it is devastating, and the resonance of the cut that was made just before the holidays, just before Christmas, it has permeated the entire fabric of the immigrant community in Ontario, and it's been very, very badly received and very devastating, as you can appreciate.
Eric Hoskins, Minister of Citizenship and Immigration and the MPP for the riding this TV station's in, St. Paul's. It's good of you to join us on the line from Ottawa. Let's do it again next time in the studio here. Good to see you. Thanks for your time.
You too, Steve. Thank you.